If any man among you seems to be wise in this world, let him become a fool that he may be wise, Saint Paul said. I am Valery V.Fadeev, and this is my series Transforming Humanism on overcoming the global political and cultural crisis. Millions and hundreds of millions of lives depend on decisions made by politicians. Are those decisions rational or irrational? If they are rational, in what sense are they rational? What are the foundations of this rationality? I used to see the US interfere into the affairs of other countries up to and including military interventions. The 20th century saw over 50 such interferences, with Iraq and Libya being the latest examples. The war in Iraq took hundreds of thousands of civilian lives. Some peg the number of deaths at 200,000. Others claim it is more than 1 million. Americans keep exact track of their own losses. 4,423 troops dead and 31,941 troops wounded. As to the dead Iraqis, well, who cares how many died? Thus today's Iraq has the democracy that Americans wanted to build and claim to have built. It is a rhetorical question. Of course, there is no democracy there. Libya is another recent example. Libya was Africa's most prosperous country. It had the best quality of life on the continent. Granted, its leader, Muammar Gaddafi, was not a paragon of liberal democracy and political pluralism. That much is clear, but social rights in Libya were largely respected. People could have a professional career and education and medical care there free. People lived their lives and developed. Americans accused Muammar Gaddafi of violating human rights. A civil war broke out. It had essentially been provoked. Muammar Gaddafi was brutally murdered. Now I have a question. Does Libya now have democracy? Does it respect political rights? Does it have political freedoms? It has none of that. And now it also has no civil rights, no political rights. That's the entire horrible story of the attack on Libya. Did the US want to destroy Iraq's and Libya's social and political systems? The answer is both yes and no. On the one hand, Americans handle practical objectives on their current politics. On the other hand, their foreign policy has very firm, very serious and very long-reaching moral foundations. The US foreign political ideology is built on those foundations, and those moral foundations hinge on American exceptionalism. The American exceptionalism concept began to emerge in the 19th century. Americans believed they had built the best society and the best political system in the history of humankind, and now they have the moral right to tell everyone else how to live their lives. In the 19th century, the US did stay out of the world at large, confining itself to the American continent. The US also did not allow any other country to interfere into its affairs on the American continent. In the 20th century, US President Woodrow Wilson effected a crucial turn in the US foreign policy. Since then, this doctrine has been known as Wilsonianism. This turn was effected after the end of World War I. For Wilson, America's destiny was believed to lie in being the beacon of freedom. America was to serve as an example for the entire world. It was to teach the rest of the world the right way to live. Wilson changed that. The prominent US diplomat Henry Kissinger says Wilson transformed what had started out as a reference reaffirmation of American neutrality into a set of propositions laying the foundations for a global crusade. In Wilson's view, there was no essential difference between freedom for America and freedom for the world. Now the main tool of American foreign policy was not a sermon, not the torch of liberty, but a crusade. It was as if in the providence of God a continent had been kept unused and waiting for a peaceful people who loved liberty and the rights of man more than they loved anything else to come and set up an unselfish commonwealth. This is a quote from the US President Wilson. A brief digression. Wilson said that the American continent was free and awaiting the arrival of peaceful people. And what about Native Americans? We know they lived there. Estimates of their numbers range from as low as 2 million to as high as 10 million. However, we do have one precise figure. A US census taken in the late 19th century. There were 200,000 Native Americans. It means that many millions of Native Americans had been killed, wiped out by the settlers who founded the United States of America. There is another dimension to this quote. Wilson relies directly on God's providence. Wilson believes the US policy to be sanctioned by the Lord. This is certainly a very solid moral foundation for implementing this policy. Who cares about several millions of Native Americans if there is a directive straight from on high? Another quote from Wilson: "We set this nation up to make men free, and we did not confine our conception and purpose to America, and now we will make men free. If we did not do that, all the fame of America would be gone, and all her power would be dissipated." And then a conclusion is drawn that has for centuries been the alpha and omega of the US foreign policy. Wilson continues: "The destruction of every arbitrary power, anywhere that can separately, secretly, and of its single choice disturb the peace of the world, or if it cannot be presently destroyed, at the least its reduction to virtual impotence." It means that American ideas, American way of life and freedom were to be promoted not by the torch of liberty, but by bombs of freedom, and any country that disagrees with the US should be destroyed. Such a state is labeled despotic, and the US is the judge of what states should be labeled despotic. We are in the Tretyakov Gallery's depository. This is Ilya Repin's famous painting Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan. Now let's try to make an intellectual flip-flop, Woodrow Wilson style, and compare Wilson's doctrine with the doctrine of the Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible, who is traditionally seen as the epitome of lawlessness and cruelty. Certainly, Ivan the Terrible did not leave behind a doctrine per se, but there is the extant correspondence between Ivan the Terrible and Prince Kurbsky. Prince Kurbsky fled the Tsardom of Russia, arrived in Lithuania and pledged fealty to the Lithuanian king. He accused Ivan the Terrible of many crimes, allegedly committed primarily against his entourage. Prince Kurbsky wrote a letter to Ivan the Terrible listing his grievances. Much offended, Kurbsky writes, "What evil and persecution have I not suffered from you? What ills and misfortunes have you not brought upon me? And what iniquitous tissues of lies have you not woven against me? And I have sought and prayed within my thoughts, and examining myself, I know not now, nor have I ever found my guilt in oath before you. In front of your army have I marched, and no dishonor have I brought upon you, but only brilliant victories. With the help of the angel of the Lord have I won for your glory, and this not in 1 year, nor yet in 2, but throughout many years have I toiled. From a regular person's point of view and from the point of view of the 16th century law, Krupski's grievances are obvious. He committed no crimes, marched in front of the army, and served the Orthodox Tsar and Orthodox Tsardom. Yet Ivan the Terrible has his own arguments, and I would call them highly intellectually sophisticated. Ivan the Terrible responds, "You, however, for the sake of your body, have destroyed the soul. Consider, wretch, from what heights and into what depths you have descended in body and soul. Is this then your piety, that you have destroyed yourself because of your self-love, and not for the sake of God, desiring short-lived glory and wealth, and not in order to escape from death? You have done this deed. If you are just and pious, as you say, why did you fear a guiltless death, which is no death but gain? In the end you will die anyhow. Why did you despise even the Apostle Paul? For he said, 'Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power ordained that is not of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and who resists God is called an apostate, which is a worst sin. And if you are just and pious, why do you not permit yourself to accept suffering from me, your frail master, and so to inherit the crown of life?' I would say Tsar Ivan has two lines of argument. The first argument is betrayal of the Orthodox Tsardom. Both Ivan the Terrible and Prince Krupski were deeply religious. Betrayal of the Orthodox Tsardom and Orthodox Tsar is a sure road to hell. Even if I, a willful ruler, had executed you, says Tsar Ivan, you would have gone to paradise because you had stayed faithful to the Orthodox Tsardom. In his second argument, Ivan refers to St. Paul. There is no power but that ordained by God, and therefore I, God anointed, can punish and pardon without giving anyone an account of it, and without having to explain my motives. The doctrines of US President Woodrow Wilson and Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible are very much alike. First, their foundations are not legal, juridical, or even geopolitical, but moral. Wilson believed America to be driven by the divine providence. Ivan the Terrible believed orthodoxy to be the only true and proper faith, and he therefore could rightly make those decisions he thought to be needed. Both appealed to the uniqueness of their civilization, American and Orthodox respectively.
В этом контексте, на мой взгляд, Иван Грозный, правитель которого считает...
Ivan the Terrible is seen as allegedly one of the cruelest rulers in the history of humankind, which is hardly correct, and I believe that in this context he emerged as a better person than Wilson. Why? Ivan the Terrible assumed personal responsibility for his actions, being fully aware that many believed them to be wicked. Unlike Ivan the Terrible, Wilson and all the American politicians alike did not assume personal responsibility. They preferred to punish countries and peoples as if those punishments had not affected specific persons.